Imagine for a second that you're walking into this massive, world-famous museum.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. And it's a museum dedicated entirely to the history of power. Leadership, human influence, all that.
Oh, sure. So lots of marble and gold, probably.
Exactly. You walk through the main halls and you see exactly what you've been conditioned to expect.
Right.
You see, like, the marble statues of kings on horseback, the oil paintings of generals with all their medals.
The guys in suits around the mahogany table.
Yeah, exactly that. It's a very specific, very familiar narrative of how the world has been run, right? How philosophy has been shaped.
It's the standard textbook version of history.
But then you take a wrong turn.
Oh, I love a wrong turn in a museum.
Right. You pull back this heavy velvet curtain and you stumble into a hidden wing that you didn't even know existed.
Okay.
And suddenly the entire narrative just flips.
Wow. In what way?
You're suddenly looking at queens who are commanding armies in the face of, like, total annihilation. You see female philosophers publicly debating the fundamental nature of the cosmos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, fierce warrior goddesses, modern female CEOs running global empires. It just completely shatters your expectation of what leadership actually looks like.
It really does. I mean, it's disorienting in the best possible way.
Totally.
You realize the history you've been taught, the one that most of us just take for granted as the definitive human story, is missing an entire dimension.
An entire half of the population, basically.
Exactly. We are so deeply conditioned to view historical power through this very singular, usually male-dominated lens.
Right, right.
So finding this hidden wing, it forces you to just completely recalibrate your understanding of authority, of, wisdom, economic influence, and even spiritual gravity.
Exactly. And that hidden wing, that feeling of having your assumptions completely blown out of the water, that is essentially what we are exploring today.
It's going to be a fascinating journey.
Welcome to this deep dive, by the way. Today, we're taking you into the heart in a really fascinating 2024 book by Vipresh Dwivedi.
Right. It's called Devi to Diva, Women of Sanatan.
Yes. And we're doing this not just to, recount some niche history. We want to trace a very specific, unbroken line of female energy across thousands of years.
Which is such a massive undertaking.
It is. We really want to unpack how these ancient cosmic archetypes translate into historical trailblazers.
Right, and eventually how they manifest as modern spiritual entrepreneurs and global leaders today.
Yeah, so for you listening, this is basically a shortcut to understanding the complex 360-degree role of women in Sanatan Dharma without getting bogged down in dense theology.
And Sanatan Dharma is the indigenous term for Hinduism, just for context.
Right, okay, let's unpack this. Because reading through this source material, it completely shattered my own stereotypes.
I think it does that for a lot of people.
Because we so often hear this tired trope, right? The passive, traditional, submissive woman in Eastern history.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost taken as a given in a lot of Western historical narratives.
Yeah, but Dwivedi's text reveals this vibrant lineage of, fierce philosophers and environmental warriors.
Strategic masterminds, even.
Exactly. It paints a picture of a culture that didn't just tolerate women in power, but at its foundational core, literally worshiped the concept of female power.
That is the crucial starting point, actually.
Yeah.
If you really want to understand the historical or even the modern roles of women in this tradition, you have to start with the cosmic blueprint.
The Devis.
Right, you have to understand the Devi, the goddess,
Yeah.
because Hinduism inherently views the ultimate cosmic energy as fundamentally feminine.
Wait, the animatic force of the whole universe is feminine?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
This energy is called Shakti. It is the active, dynamic principle of reality.
Okay, so what's the masculine principle then?
In this philosophical framework, the masculine divine principle is consciousness, but it's often described as inert or unmanifested without Shakti.
Ah, so it's just sitting there without her.
Exactly. Shakti is the breath, the movement, the creation, and the transformation.
So before we can even look at the real historical women, we really need to look at these archetypes. They shaped what a woman was expected to be.
They're the blueprint.
Right. And these aren't just characters in a storybook. Let's start with Parvati.
Okay, Parvati.
When you first read about her, she might seem very traditional to an outsider. She's the embodiment of love and devotion.
She's the consort of Lord Shiva. Right?
Yeah, and together they represent this harmonious balance. She's often depicted as the universal mother, very nurturing, sitting in the Himalayas.
And she is all of those things. I mean, her form is Gauri, radiates this boundless compassion.
Right.
And her mythology focuses heavily on her unwavering dedication. Like, She undertakes severe penance, meditating for thousands of years in the harsh mountains just to win Shiva's heart.
Which is an incredible metaphor for patience and focused will.
It is. But the fatal mistake an observer can make is stopping there.
Assuming she's static.
Right, assuming she's just this passive, devoted figure. She is not. When the cosmic situation demands it, she transforms.
Yeah, when the balance of the universe is threatened.
She assumes dynamic, terrifyingly powerful forms.
Right. She doesn't just call for her husband to come fight her battles.
No, she becomes the warrior.
She becomes Durga, the fierce protector.
Exactly. The mythology tells of this buffalo demon, Mahishasura. He had gained a boon, making him invincible to all male gods.
All of them.
All of them. The male gods were entirely defeated. So they were forced to pool their collective energies together, and from that blinding light emerged Durga.
Wow.
She rides a lion, she wields weapons given to her by all the gods, and she rides into battle to slaughter the demon.
So she's a literal symbol of divine feminine energy stepping in when the masculine divine couldn't defeat the chaos alone.
Precisely.
And then, this is what I find so compelling, it goes even further. She transforms into Kali.
Ah, yes. Kali.
And Kali is wild. If you've ever seen depictions of her, she is visually jarring.
Very striking, yes.
She's got pitch black or dark blue skin. She's wearing a garland of severed human skulls.
Wielding a bloodied sword.
Yes. And her tongue is sticking out, and she's dancing wildly on the chest of Shiva himself.
It's an intense image.
It represents the untamed transformer, right? The absolute inevitability of time. To a modern sensibility, it's almost shocking to see a goddess depicted this way.
Kali is a profound visual paradox.
Yeah.
And she's meant to be shocking because reality itself can be shocking.
Right.
She strips away the illusion of permanence. She's terrifying, yes, but she is simultaneously revered as the compassionate ultimate mother.
How does that work? How is she compassionate when she's holding a severed head?
Because she destroys the deepest demons of all. Human ignorance and the ego.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and what this archetype tells women, and society at large, is that maternal compassion and fierce destructive power are not mutually exclusive.
They exist in the exact same person.
Exactly. You do not have to be solely the gentle nurturer or solely the ruthless warrior. You have the capacity for both.
Depending on what the moment requires.
Oh, yeah.
It's a complete rejection of the one-dimensional woman. Which brings us to Lakshmi.
Goddess of wealth.
Right. Everyone knows Lakshmi. During Diwali, millions of people pray to her for financial success.
The imagery is very iconic.
She's wearing red, dripping in gold jewelry, holding a lotus flower. But the source text points out something much deeper about what she represents.
It's not just about a bank balance.
No.
It's vastly more comprehensive. Lakshmi represents holistic abundance.
Holistic.
Right. The imagery of her holding a lotus, which is a flower that blooms pristinely out of muddy waters, and a cornucopia of gold, it encompasses spiritual richness just as much as material wealth.
Okay, so it's not just cash.
Right. The text explores the concept of Ashtalakshmi, which are the 8 forms of wealth.
8 forms? Like what?
Well, they include things like the wealth of courage, the wealth of knowledge, the wealth of agriculture and food, and the wealth of progeny.
Oh, that's interesting.
Her partnership with Lord Vishnu, who is the preserver of the universe, really underscores that true prosperity is material wealth perfectly aligned with spiritual values.
So she essentially empowers women to be the architects of prosperity for their communities, but with an ethical framework.
Exactly.
It directly challenges that sort of Victorian notion that women are supposed to be delicate and separated from the gritty realities of commerce.
Precisely. If your primary deity of wealth and societal prosperity is female, it creates a cultural subconscious that inherently views women as legitimate economic drivers.
And then there's Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom and arts. I absolutely love her imagery compared to Lakshmi.
There's a very stark contrast.
Yeah, she's dressed in a simple, pristine white sari, sitting on a white lotus or riding a swan.
Holding a veena, the musical instrument.
Right, and a sacred scripture. She has no gold, no weapons. She's completely untainted by materialistic motives.
Or the chaos of war, yeah.
She represents the pure, unadulterated pursuit of knowledge.
Saraswati represents the harmonious integration of the intellect and the art, the left and right brain. She is the patron of scientists, musicians, and scholars. And what's vital about her is that she challenges any societal stereotype that confines women purely to domestic roles.
Right, because if you revere a goddess of ultimate intellect.
Exactly. The culture inherently validates female intellectual brilliance and philosophical inquiry as divine pursuits.
So we have this incredible mythological blueprint, the fierce protector, the economic powerhouse, the brilliant scholar.
It's all there.
But what truly blew my mind is that when we look back at the actual historical record, this wasn't just mythology.
No, it wasn't just wishful thinking.
Right. When we look at the earliest scriptures of humanity, real women were living this out.
Let's talk about the Rig Veda and the Upanishads.
Yeah, these texts were composed over 3,000 years ago, long before Greece or Rome.
And we have actual recorded female sages, the Rishikas.
Right, the female seers of the Rig Veda.
The Rig Veda is the foundational text of Hindu philosophy. Thousands of hymns. And these women weren't just participating in the background.
They were authoring the sacred texts.
Yeah.
Let's look at Lopamudra, for instance. The text says her hymns show this incredible poetic brilliance.
Lopamudra is a fascinating figure. She was married to the revered sage Agastya.
Okay.
And the hymns attributed to her don't just talk about abstract cosmic principles. They deeply explore the tension between asceticism, renouncing the world, and marital life.
Oh, so physical reality and desire.
Exactly. She fundamentally challenges her husband's extreme asceticism. She argues that you can pursue spiritual enlightenment without completely abandoning the joys of worldly life.
That is an incredibly nuanced philosophical position for 3,000 years ago.
It really is.
And then there's Gosha. She's described as observing the natural world with both scientific and spiritual insight.
Gosha's story is remarkable. She suffered from a severe skin condition, possibly leprosy,
Oh, wow.
which kept her confined for years. But she didn't just despair. She composed profound hymns to the Ashins, the divine twin physicians.
So she was studying healing.
Her verses show a deep, intricate knowledge of natural remedies and the desire for bodily wholeness.
You also have women like Ramasha and Apala mentioned in the text.
Right, and the sheer existence of these named female authors in a text the old proves that the pursuit of ultimate truth was absolutely not gender-gated.
And then as we move forward into the Upanishads, which are the more metaphysical texts, it gets even more intense.
We see women operating as top-tier philosophers.
Right, debating the very nature of existence. Let's talk about Maitreyi. Her story is so striking.
Oh, the dialogue with Yajnavalkya.
Yes. Her husband, this great sage Yajnavalkya, is preparing to renounce his worldly life and go into the forest to meditate.
Right.
And he offers to divide his considerable material wealth between his two wives. And Maitreyi basically looks at the wealth and asks him a profound question.
She asks, if my wealth could fill the entire earth, would it make me immortal?
Would it give me the ultimate truth?
It's one of the most famous dialogues in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad.
And he has to admit, no, it wouldn't.
Right. Yajnavalkya has to admit that no amount of material wealth grants spiritual liberation.
So Maitreyi responds, then what shall I do with that which does not make me immortal?
She explicitly rejects the comfortable, materially secure life that was expected of her.
She chooses the rigorous pursuit of ultimate reality instead.
Over a life of luxury, yes.
And if we're talking about the rigorous pursuit of reality, we have to talk about Gargi Vachaknavi.
Gargi is arguably one of the most phenomenal historical figures of the ancient world.
The scene the text describes is incredible. In the court of King Janaka, there was this massive philosophical conclave.
A huge gathering of minds.
And the king had offered a prize of 1,000 cows, each with gold tied to their horns.
Just a staggering amount of wealth.
To the wisest sage in the land. And Yajnavalkya Maitreyi's husband claimed the prize, basically daring anyone to debate him.
And all the male scholars stepped up and were systematically defeated by his intellect.
And then Gargi fearlessly stands up.
She doesn't just stand up. She launches a relentless, systematic interrogation.
She grills him.
Yes. She questions him on the fundamental nature of Brahman, the ultimate infinite reality.
Using the metaphor of weaving. Yeah.
Right. She asks what the warp and woof, the very fabric of reality, is woven upon.
And she just keeps pushing him back.
She traces existence from the physical elements to the sky to the realms of the gods, pushing him further and further into the origins of the cosmos.
She pushes him so hard that he basically tells her to stop before her head falls off.
Which is a metaphor meaning human language can only go so far before breaking down.
But the point is, she wasn't just allowed in the room to listen quietly.
No, she was a formidable, highly respected voice, demanding answers on the largest intellectual stage of her time.
Okay, so this brings me to a massive question. I really need to pause on this.
Sure.
If we have this incredible ancient history, if we have women like Gargi debating top scholars and goddesses wielding swords, How did we get to a place where women's roles were later restricted?
Is the big question.
Because it seems like the ancient goddess archetypes were like a spiritual Swiss Army knife for women.
That's a great way to put it.
It gave them a tool for every scenario. Nurturing mother, fierce warrior, wealthy provider, brilliant scholar. Why did the knife get closed? We always hear that Eastern cultures are inherently patriarchal. How do we square that with Gargi?
What's fascinating here is the historical context that text provides.
Okay.
When you look at the historical trajectory of the Indian subcontinent, it is rarely a straight, peaceful line.
Right.
Dwivedi points out that in ancient Vedic times, Hindu women were equally educated. They underwent the Upanayana ceremony, the sacred thread ceremony, just like boys.
Initiating them into education.
Yes. But over the centuries, the subcontinent experienced brutal, continuous waves of external invasions and severe socio-political upheavals.
We're talking centuries of conflict.
Looting, instability, marauding forces, and in response to these constant external threats, where women were often prime targets for abduction or enslavement during warfare.
Society had to adapt to survive.
Exactly. They began to enact highly protective measures to keep women safe. The age of marriage was lowered to protect young girls from invaders. Women's movement outside the home was restricted. Education, which required travel to hermitages or universities, became a luxury that was just too dangerous.
So it started as a desperate defense mechanism. It wasn't a philosophical shift. It was a survival tactic.
Precisely. The philosophical bedrock remained, but the sociological reality shifted drastically.
So over generations, this tragic necessity to shield communities slowly calcified.
The memory of why the restrictions were put in place faded, and the restrictions themselves hardened into rigid, patriarchal societal norms.
So the original harmonious existence was distorted.
Leading to structures that eventually restricted women's freedom, access to scriptures, and inheritance rights.
The Swiss Army knife wasn't closed because the tools were deemed useless. It was locked away because the environment outside became too hostile to open it.
Exactly.
That is such a vital piece of context. It completely changes how you view the subsequent history.
It really does.
So if the ancient blueprint was absolute empowerment, but invasions forced society into a defensive crouch that trapped women, how did a woman break out of that trap once the cage was locked?
Let's move into recorded history, where myth meets reality.
How did these divine archetypes manifest in the actions of real women facing immense pressure?
Well, we can see the bridge by briefly looking at characters in the Puranic epics, which acted as cultural anchors during those turbulent times.
Like Sita in the Ramayana.
Right. Often mistakenly portrayed as purely submissive, a deeper reading shows she demonstrates incredible resilience and fidelity under extreme psychological duress when abducted.
She actively chooses to endure her trials to uphold Dharma.
And Draupadi in the Mahabharata, who is fiercely assertive. When she's publicly humiliated in the royal court, she doesn't weep silently.
She debates the legality of her treatment.
She demands justice, and she vows a terrifying revenge that drives the entire epic war.
These aren't passive characters. They exercise immense agency.
And that agency translates directly to the historical queens of the medieval and pre-modern eras.
Let's talk about Rani Padmini in the 13th century. She is this massive symbol of Rajput valor in Chittorgarh.
A very heavy, intense historical moment.
Yeah, her kingdom was under siege by Alauddin Khilji, a notoriously brutal sultan of Delhi. The siege was prolonged, the Rajput forces were vastly outnumbered.
Defeat was absolutely inevitable.
And she chooses to lead the women of the fort in Jauhar, which is mass self-immolation. Now, to a modern listener, especially in the West, that sounds horrific.
It sounds like the ultimate tragic victimhood.
But the text analyzes this entirely differently.
It does. And it requires us to view history not from the comfort of the 21st century, but through the terrifying lens of the people living it.
Right.
When you look at 13th century siege warfare, Khilji's conquests were marked by absolute devastation. For the women of a defeated fort, capture didn't mean becoming a standard prisoner of war.
It meant unspeakable horrors, systemic assault, forced conversions.
Being dragged away into a lifetime of enslavement in a foreign harem.
It was the complete annihilation of the self and the soul.
Precisely. So the text argues that Padmini's choice of Johar was not passive victimhood.
Because all other choices were violently stripped away.
Choosing the manner of your own death in that context is the final, ultimate assertion of bodily autonomy.
Wow.
It was a deeply complex, agonizingly brave exercise of agency. They made an autonomous choice to preserve their honor and spiritual purity on their own terms.
Rather than surrender their bodies and lineage to a conqueror.
It resonates with the fierce, destructive power of Kali, a conscious embrace of fire over submission.
It's a heavy, incredibly visceral concept, but it shows just how high the stakes were.
Yes.
Now let's look at another way women navigated this shifting landscape. Let's fast forward to the 18th century, because here's where it gets really interesting.
Ahilyabai Holkar.
Yes. To me, reading about her was like reading a case study on a genius modern turnaround CEO.
Ahilyabai is an absolute masterclass in statecraft and governance.
Her story defies every patriarchal expectation of her era. Her life started with so much tragedy. She was the queen of the Maratha Malla kingdom.
And her husband is killed in battle.
Right. And at that time, society fully expects her to commit Sati joining her husband on the funeral pyre.
But her father-in-law, Mallar Rao Holkar, recognizes her brilliance.
He physically stops her. He begs her to live and help govern, but then he dies. And then her only son dies.
A staggering amount of loss.
So here she is, a widow in an incredibly volatile 18th century India. Society expects her to step down, maybe adopt an heir who will be controlled by power-hungry ministers.
And those ministers were definitely waiting in the wings. In fact, a powerful neighbor, the Peshwa's uncle Raghunath Rao, saw this widowed queen as an easy target.
He prepared to annex her kingdom.
Ahilya's response is legendary. She didn't retreat. She wrote him a letter basically saying, I am a widow. I have nothing to lose.
Oh, that's brilliant.
If you fight me and win, no one will praise you for defeating a woman. But if you fight me and lose, you will be the laughingstock of all of India.
And simultaneously, she raised an army.
She armed her female guards and prepared to lead her troops into battle on an elephant.
So Raghunath Rao backed down. She completely outmaneuvered him psychologically and politically.
And after securing her throne, she bypasses all those societal expectations and revolutionizes the kingdom. She ruled for nearly 30 years.
And her rule was incredibly egalitarian.
Very much so. She actively prioritized the welfare of all her subjects, regardless of caste or religion. She managed to merge ruthless political acumen with a deep commitment to Dharma.
She was a phenomenal builder, too. Infrastructure, forts, roads. But what's most famous is her temple architecture.
The Kashi Vishwanath Temple in Varanasi.
Right, one of the holiest sites, which had been repeatedly destroyed by invaders. She rebuilt it. She built ghats across India.
She essentially took a kingdom that could have collapsed and turned it into a powerhouse of culture and wealth.
Weaving the subcontinent together through pilgrimage routes.
And if we look at Ahiliabai's governance, it connects directly to the broader picture of legal and social evolution.
How so?
Historical female power laid the cultural groundwork for modern strides towards equality. The text details how the mid-20th century saw massive legal reforms in India.
Wait, I need to pause on this.
Sure.
The text mentions several specific acts from the 1950s and 60s. Usually, we are taught that these modern legal reforms, granting inheritance or divorce rights, were Western feminist ideals imported post-independence.
That is a fundamental misconception.
So it wasn't an adoption of Western feminism?
No. The legal strides of the 1950s were not a society looking outward to the West for a moral compass. It was a society looking inward, backward to its own ancient roots.
Oh, wow.
The Hindu Succession Act of 1956 granted daughters equal rights to ancestral property. It essentially dismantled centuries of biased inheritance norms that had built up during the era of invasions.
And there was the Dowry Prohibition Act of 1961.
Aimed at eradicating a corrupted practice,
Yeah.
and the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955, introducing the right to divorce.
From a deeply historical perspective, these strides were seeking to restore the ancient baseline of equality, the era of Maitreya and Lopamudra.
Exactly. It was correcting centuries of defensive distortion.
A massive cultural course correction back to their own baseline. Okay, so we've looked at the queens and the legal frameworks, but for you listening right now, you might be wondering, how does the average woman interact with these massive traditions today?
Right, because most people aren't queens or ancient sages.
The answer lies in the living tradition. The daily rituals, the seasonal festivals, and the shift happening right now inside temples.
Festivals are the perfect place to start. Women are the absolute linchpins of these events.
It's not just about showing up, it's about active creation, like Navaratri.
9 nights dedicated entirely to Shakti. It tracks the transition of energy from the obstacle-destroying power of Durga to the wealth-building energy of Lakshmi to the wisdom of Saraswati.
And it is so vibrant. The massive Garba and Dandiya dances in Gujarat, thousands of people moving in concentric circles.
And women are the active carriers of this spiritual energy. Through their participation, fasting, and organizing, they are actively embodying the divine feminine.
The circular nature of the dance represents the cyclical nature of time, with the goddess in the center as the unmoving truth.
They are physically enacting profound philosophy.
Then there is Karva Chauth, this rigorous fast observed by married women for the longevity of their husbands.
To a purely secular lens, it might just look subservient.
Right, but the text highlights the communal narrative aspect.
The true mechanism isn't just the deprivation of food, it's the gathering. Women gather to listen to the Vrat Katha, the fasting story.
Tales of women whose devotion could pull their husbands back from the god of death.
It's an oral tradition. By sharing these stories, they reinforce emotional resilience and remind each other of their inherent protective power.
They are the guardians of these psychological anchors. And consider Diwali. The preparation involves this exhaustive physical and spiritual cleansing of the home, Diwali Safai.
Ritual purification, orchestrated entirely by women.
They create intricate Rangoli patterns at the threshold specifically to welcome Lakshmi. They are the architects of the sacred space within the domestic sphere.
But what is truly fascinating is that their influence isn't staying confined to the home anymore.
The revolution inside the temples.
Yes. Historically, the role of the pujari, or archaka, the temple priest conducting core rituals, was strictly reserved for men.
Men of certain lineages.
But now, women are taking over these roles, learning complex Sanskrit mantras, mastering fire rituals, leading congregations.
Is this essentially like breaking the stained glass ceiling?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is crucial to understand the theological justification. This isn't just a political rebellion, it's a revival.
By reclaiming these roles, they are proving Hinduism is a deeply adaptable, living tradition.
They are arguing that spiritual prowess is determined by devotion and knowledge, not biology. They are pointing back to Gargi and saying, we have always been authorized to do this.
The text gives amazing specific examples. In South India, the Akhanda Deeparadhana tradition, the continuous lighting of the sacred temple lamp.
Flames kept burning for centuries. It requires immense stamina.
For centuries, only male priests maintained this. Now, women have stepped in as ritual matriarchs.
Another powerful example is the Pitru Paksha rituals.
That's the homage to ancestors, right?
Yes, a highly sensitive period to offer ancestors spiritual sustenance. Traditionally, a sacred duty assigned exclusively to male descendants.
So what happens when women step into that space?
It creates a seismic shift in the cultural bedrock.
Wow.
Women stepping up to perform these rituals for their parents strips away the necessity of male heirs for spiritual salvation.
It's women standing by the riverbanks offering sacred water, saying we are equally responsible for our spiritual heritage.
Exactly.
And the reclaiming of that sacred space extends to the earth itself, because the divine feminine is intrinsically tied to Prakriti, which means nature.
The earth is literally referred to as Bhumi Devi, a goddess.
We see this connection in the arts, too. Classical Indian dance forms Bharatanatyam, Kathak, Odissi.
They originated in the temples as profound physical forms of worship.
Dancers channel divine energy through mudras-specific hand gestures, acting like a sign language of the soul, and apinaya, the intense facial expressions.
A single dancer will literally embody the stories of the gods, fluidly shifting energies.
It requires immense discipline. The text highlights Rukmini Devi Arundel in the 20th century.
During British colonial rule, these arts were stigmatized. She was pivotal in reviving Bharatanatyam and stripping away the colonial stigma.
And we see art as worship in everyday life with Rangoli, transforming a dusty courtyard into a sacred canvas.
But that beautification is deeply ecological, which brings us to eco-spirituality.
Right. In Hindu philosophy, the earth is not an inert resource waiting to be exploited.
It is a living, breathing manifestation of the divine. The rivers are goddesses,
Ganga Yamuna.
and women naturally step into the role of earth stewards.
It almost sounds like a tech problem. You have this thousands-of-year-old software, the religious rituals, and women are using that ancient code to execute a modern hardware fix for the planet. It's open-source conservation.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The ancient software is built into the rituals. It just needed to be directed at modern crises.
Like Nadi Snan, the river cleansing ritual.
Traditionally, it meant taking a dip to purify the soul, but modern female activists have shifted the focus. How can you purify your soul if the river is choked with plastic?
So they organize mass movements to clean the riverbanks. The spiritual purification perfectly mirrors the physical purification.
And Vat Purnima, married women tying sacred threads around a banyan tree.
They evolved it into massive community-led tree planting initiatives, scaling up the ritual.
The text profiles eco-warriors operating directly from this place of eco-spirituality, like Dr. Vandana Shiva.
There's their organization, Navdanya, fighting corporate monopolies over seeds.
She treats biodiversity as a sacred trust, a manifestation of the goddess's abundance that cannot be patented.
And Dr. Janaki Amal, a pioneering botanist who integrated indigenous ecological knowledge with scientific research.
She defended the pristine Silent Valley forest from a hydroelectric dam. She was literally defending Prakriti.
We see it in urban environments, too. Nisha Millet advocating for plastic-free oceans, or the Daily Dump Initiative in Bengaluru teaching composting.
Applying the concept of the mother goddess to the literal soil and garbage of modern cities.
Redefining environmentalism from a political chore to a spiritual imperative.
Protecting the earth is the highest form of seva, or selfless service.
Which sets up our final section perfectly. How is this manifesting right now in the hyper-modern, globalized economy?
Enter the spiritual entrepreneur, or the modern diva.
Right. These are women navigating the cutthroat business landscape using a holistic mind-body-soul paradigm.
Translating the blueprints of Lakshmi and Saraswati into digital platforms and global communities.
Sister Shivani is a phenomenal example, reaching hundreds of millions globally with teachings on mindfulness and emotional intelligence.
Packaging ancient wisdom for the exhausted modern worker.
And Deepika Mehta, bridging yogic practices with modern mindfulness to help people deal with 21st century anxiety.
You see it in physical commerce, too. Satya Scanetti founding a jewelry company where every piece is designed with spiritual intention.
Commerce and meaning intertwined.
And massive global initiatives like Sadhguru's Isha Foundation. The logistical execution is heavily led by thousands of dedicated women operating on the principle of seva.
We also have to look at the global diaspora, Hindu women bridging cultures, like Sunita Viswanath using progressive Hindu values to promote social justice in the U.S.
Or Sharmila Kantha, a Hindu chaplain at Georgetown University fostering interfaith dialogue.
The text traces this blend of intellect and resilience to the very pinnacle of modern success. Indra Nooyi at PepsiCo, Kamala Harris, Kalpana Tola.
Truly a broad spectrum.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate for a second. Looking at the spiritual entrepreneur, isn't that phrase kind of an oxymoron? How do you balance making a profit, the defining goal of capitalism, with seva, which is completely selfless service? Don't they crash into each other?
This raises an important question, and it is the absolute crux of the modern diva's challenge.
Seems impossible.
It seems like an oxymoron if you look at it purely through the Western hyper-capitalist model, where success is exclusively about infinite growth.
Right.
But in the Hindu holistic paradigm, business success isn't just about financial gain. Profit is necessary. It's the lifeblood of sustainability. But the purpose must align with Dharma.
The business actually has to do good in the world, not just write a check for a tax write-off.
Precisely. It involves a deep analysis of community impact. Are you empowering local artisans? Are you using eco-friendly materials that honor Prakriti?
Fostering global peace, like Dina Merriam with the Global Peace Initiative of Women.
The spiritual entrepreneur believes you should generate wealth, remember Lakshmi, but it must be used to nurture the ecosystem around you. It's an integration of profit and purpose.
That is incredibly empowering. It completely reframes your career. You don't have to split yourself down the middle. You were supposed to be both materially successful and deeply spiritual.
Yes, that is the core thesis of Dwivedi's book. The Devi to Diva pipeline flows from the cosmic blueprints of Parvati and Lakshmi right into the modern boardrooms and eco-activism of today.
Taking ancient wisdom and applying it with fierce, modern adaptability.
Exactly.
And for you listening right now, whether you are prepping for a massive board meeting, building a business, or just seeking some personal balance, this holistic approach is a masterclass.
It refuses to compartmentalize human existence.
Blending the fierce intellect of Gargi with the strategic leadership of Ahilyabai and the compassion of the eco-warriors, that is a practical framework you can apply today.
You bring all of it, all the time. You are the full spectrum.
We want to leave you with one final, incredibly provocative thought from the text to mull over.
The concept of Ardhanarshvara.
Yes. This is a specific depiction of the divine, often Lord Shiva, as a perfect, literal union of masculine and feminine energies, drawn half male, half female.
The ultimate visual symbol of non-duality. Absolute reality contains perfect equality between masculine and feminine principles.
Right. So if the highest philosophical truth is a perfect 50-50 balance, could the true future of global leadership rely not on women simply succeeding within historically male-dominated aggressive systems?
Right. What if the goal isn't just forcing women to act like the men who built those boardrooms?
Exactly. What if the goal of true human progress is a complete societal restructuring? Imagine a world where the feminine qualities we discussed, eco-consciousness, holistic well-being, merging profit with purpose, become the default baseline for all human leaders.
Regardless of their gender.
Yes. What if that becomes the new standard of power?
If Ardhanarishvar is the true blueprint for reality, humanity needs to evolve to adopt the full balanced spectrum of these ancient values.
Think about that. The next time you find yourself walking through the metaphorical museum of power, don't just accept the old narrative.
Look for the hidden wing.
Because the blueprint for a better, more balanced future might just be waiting behind that velvet curtain, guarded by a lineage of women who have been wielding the universe's ultimate energy since the dawn of time.